What will the Oklahoma Sooners have to do to win on Friday if Dillon Gabriel is not available? We'll break it down on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at Josh on Ref. The show is at Locked On Sooners. And Josh, the big question heading into Friday is Dillon Gabriel's availability. I don't know. I was trying to merge those two words there and didn't really work out very well. Brent Venables says he expects him to be available if things continue to trend that way. But based on what happened leading into Red River a year ago, again, a much scarier hit, a bigger deal than what it was this past Saturday. Do you expect him to play Friday? And if so, and if not, what does Oklahoma got to do with Jackson Arnold at the helm?
Couple of things. Off the top, a very happy Thanksgiving to you, John, and a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody watching and listening along here on Locked On Sooners. You everyday members, you everydayers, we're thankful for all of you. It's the only reason we get to do this is because of all of you. And so I hope that you have a lot to be thankful for this year as well. Dillon Gabriel, I think he's going to go. And part of my rationale for why I think he's going to go is this time a year ago, we basically, we more or less knew that felt like it was so concrete that he wasn't playing versus Texas. And I feel like we've got less of that type of buzz this week, but let's explore the he's not going to play route. We got to see a healthy dose of Jackson Arnold a week ago. And, really, I think, as I told you earlier this week, he had one drive that was a scoring drive that wasn't a scoring drive because you missed a field goal. And the other, final drive, you iced the clock away. So that might have wound up being a scoring drive if you needed it to be. And then obviously with the short field, they paid it off. So 3 out of 5 drives I thought were pretty good for Jackson Arnold in this Oklahoma offense. So if it goes that route, what do you need to do in order to be successful and win this final football game, John?
Well, for me, it's don't really change anything. Keep your offense. Don't decide, okay, we're going to scale things back because we have a true freshman that's going to go play football. No, you've got a really, really, really good true freshman, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, regardless of situation. In the 2023 recruiting cycle, he was a top 3, top 5 quarterback, a top 10 player in the class, the Elite 11 MVP, the Gatorade National Player of the Year. The dude's got all the talent in the world. We've seen a little bit on display at times this year. You can go back to the non-conference. You can go back to this past weekend against BYU. I just think go run your offense. Don't feel like you've got to scale things back and be conservative because you've got Jackson Arnold. And no, this is why it's so important to get a guy like Jackson Arnold so that you can do everything that you want to do. He's got the arm to do everything you want to do going down the field. He's got the ability to move around the pocket, to run, to scramble. He can, we saw it with the Jalil Farouk ball. He's got the accuracy in the short game. So just run your offense and continue to be aggressive like you've been at home, and you've been really, really good. Yes, you're going to see a healthy dose of Gavin Sawchuk because the dude and the offensive line have been playing really, really well in the running game. But for me, when you do go back to throw the ball, man, let him unleash it. Let's see what he can do going into next year. The best way to help Jackson Arnold to prepare for next season is to let him put as much on tape on Friday as possible, assuming he plays, so that he can reevaluate. He can go back and figure out, okay, what did I do well? What did I not do well? But if you scale things back and you run a conservative offense and we don't really get to see Jackson Arnold be Jackson Arnold for good and for bad, then you're not going to give him that opportunity to truly learn.
Well, and there is a vast difference between, okay, surprise, now you get to go quarterback this thing for the entirety of the second half. And oh, by the way, we didn't get you any wiggle room here at BYU. I mean, there's a big difference between that situation and, hypothetically, Oklahoma, though they haven't said it publicly, knows that Dillon Gabriel is not going to play, and they've been prepping it that way all week, where Jackson Arnold's been getting all the one reps. So, again, I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think Dillon Gabriel's playing in this game until I see that Dillon Gabriel's not playing in this game. But under the scenario that it is going to be Jackson Arnold, I like the fact that obviously you've had a full week, John, to approach it that way. Hopefully you kind of knew early in the week and you weren't just like kicking the can down the road all week, that you had, okay, it's going to be Dillon Gabriel. No, it's going to be Jackson Arnold. You had that finalized fairly early this week, because I think that, to what you're talking about, which I would agree with, don't just magically be the team that only turns and hands off to Gavin Sawchuk and Tommy Walker, right? I mean, let Jackson Arnold drop back. Let him get mobile in the pocket. Let him throw downfield. Let him find his pass catchers. Let him run the Oklahoma offense. It's easier to do that if you've, again, had a whole week building up with that being the expectation.
No, that's very true. But, and this is why I kind of go back to the Red River game last year. They spent the entire week either giving Dillon Gabriel the first team reps or creating this offense that wasn't going to allow Davis Bevel to throw the football. Now, two very different quarterbacks, and this is no disrespect to Davis Bevel, but if you go through the week in the same way, where you're giving Dillon Gabriel all the first team reps and you're not preparing Jackson Arnold adequately for this week, and then come Friday, Dillon Gabriel's not available, you didn't really do your quarterback much justice in getting him ready. So my hope is that, and Brent Venables said it, Arnold's had all the reps that he needs to have to be ready to play on Friday if he needs to play. I hope that's not just coach speak. I hope that is, listen, we've given Dillon Gabriel, we gave him Monday off, we gave him Tuesday off, and we're getting Jackson Arnold as many first team reps as we possibly can, so that if he has to play Friday, again, I kind of think he's going to play Friday. If he plays, he's more than ready, because he's been working in the offense. He's been working in the game plan. He's been preparing like he's going to start. And then if Dillon Gabriel is available, then there you go. You just play Dillon Gabriel. But it's a TCU team that can light up the scoreboard if they're playing at their best. And so your offense needs to be ready to hit the ground running and humming, because you cannot have, much lag in this game. Now, if TCU's offense comes in and they're turning the football over like they have at times this season, then you're going to have a little bit of wiggle room, but you want to go into this game just really looking to execute in every way possible so that you can get out to a big lead and then have a little bit of a comfortable, Black Friday affair against TCU. Any other thoughts on this Jackson Arnold, Dillon Gabriel stuff before we, jump to the next segment, Josh?
I mean, the obvious part would be, while we say don't totally scale it back, don't become so predictable that it's, okay, we're not really going to totally open up the reins of the offense. The other part of it, obviously, offensively, would be continue to have success on the ground, right? I mean, while we say don't totally scale it back, you're going to have to be able to run the football effectively,
yes,
outside of just the quarterback run game, if indeed it is Jackson Arnold, to help alleviate a little bit of that pressure and stress. And then maybe we can dive into some of this next, but the defense needs to give you some of what it gave you the week before, which was a timely play or two, if again it's going to be Jackson Arnold.
We're going to talk a little bit about TCU heading into this matchup, things that Oklahoma's going to have to do to negate some of their skill talent, and also just what's up with TCU. The team that was really, really good in one-score games a year ago has not been so in this season. We'll talk more about that next. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Josh, the TCU Horned Frogs come in at 5-6, hoping to knock off Oklahoma and gain that bowl eligibility. There's a lot of teams right now in the Big 12 that are either bowl eligible now. I think there's 8 teams bowl eligible right now, and another 3 teams with wins this weekend, BYU, TCU, and UCF, that could each earn bowl eligibility. I think UCF is the one that's got the most likely chance. I think they play Houston. So it's going to be fascinating, but TCU's got a lot to play for. They're the team that, ran through the Big 12 before losing to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, went to the college football playoff. They beat Michigan and then got absolutely hammered by Georgia in the national title game, but lose Max Duggan, lose Kendre Miller, Steve Avila, several guys on defense. I'm blanking on their names at the moment, and Quentin Johnston, just a lot of really important dudes on that team. And that's part of the reason why they've fallen back to 5-6. But in talking with Steven Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs yesterday, he did not expect it to fall off this far.
I don't think anybody did,
No.
Right? You and I had talked in the summer, and TCU was one of our fallback candidates. Now, that's easy to say, though, when you're talking about a team that played close games and honestly wasn't great defensively a season ago. They were a lot like Oklahoma at BYU, where they gave up a bunch of yards but made a timely play or two and won football games, right? I mean, that was kind of TCU a year ago. That's what they were defensively. And so there was reasons to think that they would fall back to the pack minus, a Duggan, minus obviously Kendre Miller and Quentin Johnston, who you touched on offensively. They had to replace a lot. And oh, by the way, when the bar is, okay, you made it to the national championship game, it's obvious that probably TCU wasn't going to do that. And, probably wasn't going to make it back to the Big 12 championship game. But to think that, John, we would be having a conversation about if they don't win at Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium, that they're not going to a bowl game. I don't know that a lot of people felt that way about this TCU team. Probably a lot of people didn't think Baylor was going to be as bad as Baylor has been. But the interesting thing to me is, you flash back to this time a year ago, and because of what TCU was doing, these close games they were winning, and Duggan was having a magical season, and Quentin Johnston obviously is a tremendous individual player, because they kept kind of pulling the rabbit out of the hat, and one thing led to another. They get into the college football playoff, they spring an upset. Sonny Dykes was this guy that, okay, is he going to be the one ruling the roost after Oklahoma and Texas leave? And there was a lot of consternation about, is Brent Venables the right guy? This has been a nice little lesson in, you just can't put all of your stock into one season, respectively, positively or negatively, because you think about where the trajectories of these two programs and the coaches were at a year ago, John. I mean, it's polar opposite last year to this.
Yeah, you think if Oklahoma had some of the talent that TCU was working with on that team, Oklahoma team last year, you think things go a little bit better than 6-7? I do. If you've got a Quentin Johnston on the outside, you got a Kendre Miller running the football, I think you're a better football team. You got a Steve Avila at guard. Like, you got a pretty good football team, and you're probably winning a few more games. Now, with Max Duggan versus Dillon Gabriel, it's hard to say, but again, Max Duggan was just clutch. Like, he had a lot of that magic to him. It's fascinating, and I think you're absolutely right, man. You cannot judge a coaching hire based on one season. I know a lot of people are wanting to throw, Deion Sanders and bury him and dig his grave all of a sudden at Colorado after one bad year, but he showed a lot of good things early in the season, and that has that team a lot more competitive than what they were a year ago. But, Brent Venables, he's done a really nice job at, flipping the script on this thing. 6-7, it's not good enough. That's nowhere near what people expected Oklahoma. I mean, even if they finish 10-2, there's going to be a lot of still like, hey, it wasn't quite good enough because we let a couple wins get away from us. And I think what we're seeing from this team is, okay, they're pretty good. They're getting better, week by week, game by game. They've shown a lot, still not quite good enough to, win a game when they're not at their best, especially on the road. And I think what we're seeing is just the progression of a program. Venables has a clear plan and identity that he wants to instill, and it takes time to do that. You kind of have to thin some things out and some players, and you have to weed out some, guys that aren't going to really fall in line with the program. But what we're seeing this year is just, and he keeps talking about it, just a lot of buy-in, a lot of, guys that are really bought into the program, bought into the characteristic of what that program wants to be about. And that's not to say that that's not happening with Sonny Dykes and TCU, but it just goes to show just how much when you lose a lot of talent, kind of like Oklahoma did from 2021 to 2022, in particular on the defensive side of the ball, when Nick Bonito and Isaiah Thomas and Brian Asamoah and Delrin Turner-Yell and Patrick Fields and Perion Winfrey, all those guys went off to the NFL, and Patrick Fields went off to Stanford. I mean, you lost a lot of starter snaps in that group. And then, to go into 2022 in a new defensive system without all that talent, it's not all that surprising. You look back on it and see why the defense fell off like it did. But now we're seeing the uptick. We're seeing things start to turn in the positive for Brent Venables. And he's just got to keep building, got to keep, believing in the process and building according to the process. And I think the recruiting classes are going to continue to show what Oklahoma's building. And, 2023 has really shown out. You got some young guys on the field. 2024 is going to provide an opportunity for more young guys to get out on the field as well. But you got to just keep building. Things are looking bright, but you got to keep it going.
So what do you expect from this TCU team as we start thinking about, okay, there's the trajectories of the programs, and for Oklahoma, in order for us to, again, get to the finishing point of this being, yes, more positive than negative, they got to win this game, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we said that the last couple of weeks that, look, you can't go back and get the magic eraser out and get rid of Kansas or Oklahoma State. They're in the record books. But the one thing you could do is perform great coming down the home stretch. We didn't really get that versus BYU, but they did win, right? So the most important thing is finish 10-2. How does Oklahoma do that versus TCU here? What type of challenge is it? Because, this has been sort of an interesting series in the sense that there's not been this defined rhyme or reason to it. Been a couple of times that Oklahoma, when you thought should have their way with TCU, did have their way with TCU, but there's been plenty of other games along the way where it was close against the Horned Frogs. And I guess what I'm saying to you is, are you expecting this to get weird?
I think it's got the potential for it. If Josh Hoover is able to take care of the football, I think that really bodes well for TCU. And I know that's real simplistic, but he's had a lot of turnover problems. I want to say, if I can look at it real quick, I want to say he's got like 8 interceptions on the season. If I don't know if I can find it fast enough, but he's just not been very good protecting the football. Yeah, he's got 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, but he'll have a 400-yard day on you if you're not paying attention. And Oklahoma has been a little bit susceptible in pass defense at times. So if you're not careful and you let him get a little bit comfortable and he's able to take care of the football, then things could get really interesting. Amani Bailey, he's not having this big breakout season in the loss of Kendre Miller, but he's a guy that kind of like RJ Harvey for UCF that's got a little bit of wiggle to him, is able to make guys miss. And if he does make a guy miss, is able to hit you for a big play. To me, a lot of this for Oklahoma just comes down to being disciplined. Be disciplined on defense in your zone reads, in your coverage. Be disciplined in the run game. That was one of Brent Venables' complaints coming out of the BYU game, is that they just weren't disciplined enough in their run fits. If you're not discipline in your run fits this week, you're going to see some of the same issues. But I just think that Oklahoma is a better team on both sides of the ball at home, and TCU is not as good on the road as they are at home. So I think this kind of bodes well for Oklahoma, but it could definitely have this, Black Friday get weird kind of situation going on.
Well, and especially if again, to revisit the point off the top, if Dillon Gabriel's not going, then it really, cranks up it could get weird meter, just because all of a sudden you got a couple of freshman quarterbacks leading the charge both ways, which is almost guaranteed to get weird, right? It could be great. It could be great for Oklahoma. And then coming out of it, if it is Jackson Arnold that goes and he plays great, then obviously that ratchets up the optimism meter going into the SEC. But I like Oklahoma to play well. We need to see it.
That's right. Speaking of Black Friday, there's been a lot of talk about what the crowd could look like on Saturday there in Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. We'll talk about that and talk through some Big 12 title scenarios, as well as our picks for Friday coming up after the break. And if you're still looking for some tickets for that Black Friday affair between Oklahoma and TCU, Game Time has got a lot of great options for you, actually. If you want to get in that lower bowl, I'm seeing seats anywhere from like $40 to $60. You can get in on the 50-yard line for like $78, $106. The prices right now over at Game Time are absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if it's just everybody's deciding they'd rather go trying to find that flat screen TV or whatnot, but this could be your opportunity. If you've been wanting to get to a game this season, you just haven't found the right price, the right deal, go to Game Time, use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and you can get $20 off your first purchase. So the price you see at Game Time, take that $20 off if you haven't used them before, but go download the Game Time app in your app store, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So many fantastic seats available. There's already prices up for the Alamo Bowl as well. I was checking those out just to see, could we make the trip? Well, it's on a day that I would normally work, so I'd have to get that request off in here pretty quick. But great prices for the Alamo Bowl. If that's where Oklahoma ends up, could end up in the Cotton Bowl if some things get a little bit weird in the final week of Big 12 play. But again, go download the Game Time app, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. And thank you again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Josh, it's a weird Friday thing. Like, I think back in the day, maybe there were some Black Friday games against Oklahoma State that came during rivalry week, if I remember correctly. But also, it just feels weird not to be playing Oklahoma State this week. I don't know. Sure, yes, TCU, it's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. But I don't know. Bedlam should just have been reserved for this week. It's kind of a travesty that it wasn't. I was a little bit upset about the scheduling of that. But anyway, moving forward, what do you expect the crowd to be like when Oklahoma rolls into Gaylord Family on Saturday?
Well, it's the fact that it's an 11 a.m. kick is perhaps a little bit challenging on a Black Friday, right? You got to turn around from your Turkey Day stuff so quick. So that part, maybe you could entertain me on. The students, I'm trying to think back. I don't know that Thanksgiving week games have typically been poorly attended, or that it's felt naturally much poor. And I know that this moves it up a day. And yet, man, when I was a student, I'm not missing a Black Friday home game. No way. After I bought student tickets, and this is the final Big 12 home game for Oklahoma. So there's a lot of reasons. Senior day. There's a lot of reasons to be fired up to go to the game, right? If I'm a student. So the students, you could entertain me a little bit that, okay, maybe because you got a large portion that's from Dallas, DFW, and they go home or whatever, and then don't come back that day right after Thanksgiving for the game. But generally speaking, I don't know that we're going to notice a big difference. I actually think it's going to be a supercharged environment, because everybody's fired up with the holiday.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You've had so much time to plan for this. This isn't a surprise. It's not, hey, we got flexed to Black Friday, this is going to be weird. No, you've had all, 6, 8 months, 9 months. I can't remember when the schedule came out, but 9 months to get ready for this Black Friday game. You've had a chance to make your plans accordingly and just say, hey, I'm going to football. And again, I can't, sit here and judge anybody that's not going. I got to work on Friday. So, and not this job, but my day job in the hospital as a nurse, I got to work, got to take care of people. So it is going to be interesting to see how that crowd turns out. But again, I think with senior day, with the last Big 12 game, with still a lot to play for, you got to win this one in order to have a shot at reaching the Big 12 title game, which we're going to talk about that here in a second, that, yes, it might be a slim shot, but you still got a shot, and you need your crowd there. You need your fans there. Oklahoma's had a really good home environment this year. I thought the game a couple weeks back against West Virginia was some of the loudest I've heard through the broadcast of an Oklahoma game in some time. And I think that just goes to show the excitement that people have about the Oklahoma defense and what it's doing, because where best can an Oklahoma fan base really have an impact? It's when your defense is on the field and you're starting to see it have an impact with false starts to the opponent and things like that. So I think Oklahoma fans are really bought in to being a part of the success of the team at home. Brent Venables called for it whenever he got to Oklahoma. He's like, we want to have I can't remember we want to be a nightmare. We want to have a nightmare environment for teams to play in. And I think Oklahoma fans have really risen to the occasion over the last, couple of years. So I think it's going to be a big crowd. Maybe it has a little bit of a hangover effect from Thanksgiving Day early on, but as the first quarter wanes on, I think they really start to get into it. And especially if Oklahoma gives them something to get excited about early on.
My only disappointment is that it's not a primetime kick. I think if this was a Black Friday, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock kick, I genuinely think it would be a game that maybe we'd be talking about for a long time, that it would be one of those games you really remember, and that maybe it could even morph itself into the point where people are like, we should do that again. That was pretty cool. We'd like to play a Black Friday game every year, but the fact that it's at 11 and it does, make that turnaround from folks having to travel, because that's real, right? You're going out of town to see your family. Then all of a sudden, if you're coming back to the game, it's now you're cutting Thanksgiving short, or you're not going at all, So I like that part. I do understand presents some challenges and takes maybe a little bit of the bite, a little bit of the punch away. I wish it was a primetime game. And if it was, I think it had the chance to be, again, very, very memorable. It still might be, John, but I do think it loses a little bit by not getting that ticket.
Greg Sankey, if you're listening, make next year's, final week of the season, give us a Thanksgiving, or not even Thanksgiving Day, but a Black Friday game in prime time, 7 p.m. kick. Maybe not the LSU game. Let's save that one for earlier in the year, but a primetime kick. We don't want to be on the road for Black Friday primetime kick. Anyway, that's just what I'm saying. All right, Josh, Big 12 title scenarios. Heartland Sports put out a pretty good article that kind of breaks all this down. Heartland College Sports, you can go check that out. It's like, if this happens, then this happens for the Big 12 title game. Really, the simplest scenario for Oklahoma is the BYU Cougars that played last week against Oklahoma show up again this week in Stillwater and upset the Cowboys. That is the scenario that is the simplest. It's the easiest one to follow. After that, you need a lot more help. You need Texas Tech to win. You need Iowa State to win. And then it just gets a little bit more convoluted. So it's real easy. We don't like the Cowboys. We don't like the Pokes. We don't like Oklahoma State anyway. So Cougar fans, Cougar Nation, BYU, Jake Retzlaff, go have a day Saturday.
Yeah, there's based on what I'm looking at here, a couple of scenarios. Again, you hit it. The obvious one would be everybody that we expect to win. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State wins, and BYU pulls the upset over Oklahoma State. The other situation would be Oklahoma wins, Oklahoma State wins, and then Tech upsets Texas, and Iowa State, a mild upset, right, beats Kansas State. So if that happens, it'd be Bedlam part 2, and that would be kind of fun. And that's not totally out of the realm of possibility, right? I mean, it would take, pretty healthy upset from Texas Tech. But if you tell me that you get that half of the equation, well, then the Iowa State half, I mean, that wouldn't be the most shocking result of all time in Farmageddon. But bottom line is the most important part of all of this, Oklahoma's got to beat TCU. You gotta do your own work first.
Yep, you got to get your dub, and you can't worry about anybody else. Josh, let's get some picks real quick. I shared my pick on the Locked On crossover. I'm going Oklahoma 35-24. I think this is a game where maybe Oklahoma gets out to a bit of a lead, and then Josh Hoover kind of settles in and is able to kind of keep in striking distance, but never quite doesn't quite get there to really make it a game in the fourth quarter. I think Oklahoma's defense bounces back from what was a poor first half against BYU. They really settled in the second half. I think they come in locked in. Again, this team has been so much better at home on both sides of the ball than they've been on the road.
Who's playing quarterback? If Gabriel's playing quarterback, I think Oklahoma's going to roll pretty comfortably. If it's Arnold, I could see this being competitive. And that's not to knock on Arnold at all. I think it's just an experience factor at play. And that obviously would be advantageous for TCU. So because of the uncertainty of it, I'm still leaning that Gabriel's playing until I find out otherwise, but that has me maybe tightening things a little bit. I'm still going to take Oklahoma fairly comfortably. I'm going to take OU 37, TCU 24, but my antennas are up that maybe it tightens down. If it's Arnold going, then I'm thinking like 31-24. I think it's tighter than expected if it's Arnold getting the start, but I do like Oklahoma to win in both scenarios.
Yeah, I really like that score. 5 touchdowns and a safety. That'd be a really fun one for Oklahoma. So, hey, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Follow Josh on Twitter at Josh on Ref, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners, and we'll have coverage for you after this one goes final at some point. It might be Friday. It might be a late Friday episode that we record and then release for you on Saturday. But tune in again. Be subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. On the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.